Thank you for joining us here at Doctor's Nutrition. I'm Dr. Jim.
I'm Dr. Janine.
We're going to talk to you about vitamin D deficiency today.
Yeah, it's a really common problem.
It is.
That many people have. I can honestly say that if people are not supplementing, I would say we see in our patients probably at least 90% people are deficient in vitamin D if they're not supplementing. Now, of course, nowadays, since COVID, you see a lot more people supplementing. So you don't see as many deficient because most people are taking vitamin D. But even since then, we still have probably at least 50% are still vitamin D deficient because not everybody is supplementing.
Well, they tended to take the vitamin D during COVID. And yeah, that's gone. So, okay, I'll stop that. No big deal. And that's one of the problems.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the common problems you might see if you're vitamin D deficient. And it's stuff that we see every day. Fatigue, I'm tired. And the tired and hurt all over. That's probably the things that I hear the most about vitamin D is they just ache everywhere, hurt all over. Now you have the problem called fibromyalgia. And I've even seen articles written that says, is it really fibromyalgia or is it a vitamin D deficiency? Because it can have some of the same symptoms.
I think it was about, I don't know, time flies, but it might have been 7 or 8 years ago.
It's been a long time ago,
There was one of the research articles we looked at said, is it fibromyalgia or a vitamin D deficiency? They made a pretty strong case for it being a vitamin D deficiency. They really did.
And now another thing on the vitamin D deficiency is, you can get muscle weakness, cramps. Now, depression is another big one that's been linked with vitamin D. There's been a lot on depression that shows if you actually take vitamin D along with omega-3s, you can actually help depression as well as some of the antidepressants.
Yes.
So that is one of the things you want to have at optimal levels for depression. Now, there's the other symptom, hair loss, that there are so many deficiencies that make hair loss.
There really are.
Again, it's not always a thyroid problem.
No, but that's the first thing to think about. That's the first thing to think about.
It can be other deficiencies that make hair loss, like vitamin D. Now, people that get sick constantly and have slow wound healing and skin problems, and you always have to rule out a vitamin D deficiency. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that vitamin C deficiency actually will make your blood pressure higher.
Yes.
And there has been a lot of research out there about that. So it's not just us saying it. The high blood pressure can be a definitely contributed factor is vitamin D deficiency. So again, if you have high blood pressure, you always want to check your vitamin D. Now, the other kind of a symptom is really a problem is bone loss. Now, most people have heard that one.
Yeah, osteopenia,
osteoporosis, you always got to look to see if you have vitamin D deficiency. D is very important along with your magnesium and calcium, and there's a lot of things that go into bone. But if you don't have your vitamin D, you cannot utilize your calcium properly.
Yeah, but we always caution people about, okay, that's just one of the keys. Along with that D, you need 2 other nutrients.
We need vitamin A and K2 with them, but the D deficiency itself is something you want to definitely look for.
Well, if we've got a D deficiency, because you can check A and D both, but now there's not a good check for the K2 levels. So we kind of use a rule of thumb that's actually been put out by a lot of the researchers over the years. If you take, say, 5,000 units of vitamin D, then you take 500 micrograms of K2.
We always use them together.
Right, always.
Now, why is D so important? That's one of the questions that people, is it really that important that I bring my vitamin D up?
Yeah,
yes,
it's a hormone.
It is. It is a hormone. It's not just a vitamin.
I think it got a bad rap by being called vitamin D.
Yeah.
If we call this, I don't know, whatever hormone, people would pay a lot more attention to it.
And I think for years they always were like, oh, don't get too much. Don't go over 400 IU. For years, there was false information out there about vitamin D.
And there still is.
There still is, because you occasionally will still say, you know what, we don't think you should supplement vitamin D. And that is not true. I mean, I see so many problems helped by vitamin D. So vitamin D is very important to have at optimal levels.
Yes.
Yep.
Now, one of the big issues that comes up, and think about this, we all have about 22 to 23,000 active genes. The others are they're there in supportive roles. But we have these active genes. Out of that 20-some thousand genes that we have that are functional, making proteins and so on, 2,500, actually more than 2,500 so far. Their functionality controlled by vitamin D.
I know, and that's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that it helps with bone density, but a lot of people don't think about it being cancer prevention.
Yes.
And I have had some of the lowest people I've seen have cancer. They come in because they do have cancer, and you start, doing our lab work, which checks for kind of everything, and their D will be like 5, which is extremely low.
Yes.
And so I have seen that. And so you don't want to wait until you do have like a cancer. You want to keep those optimal to help your bone density stay up, keep your genes working properly. And another thing it can help is metabolism.
It helps it functional better, a lot better. Keeping that metabolic function going is huge for your health. Low vitamin D, and especially, if a person's overweight, if they have diabetes, if they have any other health conditions, typically speaking, you look at them, they're going to be low in vitamin D.
Yeah, and speaking of vitamin D helping glucose. So it actually helps with the actual sugar if you are diabetic.
Exactly.
So it's one of the things that it can help also.
And the immune system. Think about that one now.
People that are just constantly sick.
Yep.
Sick all
See it
the
all the
time. You gotta check your D level. You gotta see if it's optimal. So that's what we recommend, is always check that level. Why is everybody deficient? Because we do see that is one of the biggest deficiencies I can say that we see is a vitamin D deficiency. Now, people don't go outside anymore. They don't get enough sunlight. That is probably the number one reason that people have more deficiency today than they did years ago.
Exactly.
And the darker someone's skin, the lower their amount of vitamin D they can produce, because your dark skin acts like a sunscreen.
It is.
And sunscreen itself blocks vitamin D production, but dark colored skin also blocks the production because it actually is like it doesn't let you make as much.
Yeah.
You mentioned people being overweight have vitamin D deficiency. That is definitely a problem, because more overweight you are, the less you tend to make as well. And if you have liver problems or kidney problems, that could make you not make as much. So there's a lot of things, because vitamin D is so important that we produce it in our body. The majority of our vitamin D is not from food. It's from your own body making it. But then people go out there and, take a lot of medications that deplete it. Gastric bypass, depletes it. And it's hard to get from the diet anyway, but then doing things on top of it that make it harder for your body to make it doesn't help either.
Yeah, some of the foods that actually help are the sun-dried mushrooms. Depending on where you live, that can be kind of hard to find.
Right.
Especially, I know, in our grocery stores most of the time, because the sun-dried shiitake, I think, has some of the highest levels.
Right, but you got to find the sun-dried mushrooms, not just regular mushrooms.
Because their skin, the mushroom skin,
it produces it with sunlight
produces it
too.
as well, just like we do,
Now, egg yolks, liver, fatty fish, they have some.
They have some.
But again, I've read articles that talk about how hard it is to get just from the diet.
Very.
Being out in the sun is the best source. But if you cannot get out in the sun as much, or you burn too easy, or you just, it's one of those things that you're just not making it because you might be overweight or taking a medication, then you definitely want to supplement.
Yes,
that is one of the easiest things to bring up is vitamin D. Always use D3,
yes,
not D2. And there's actually some negative research out about D2. So we always recommend to do D3. And like he mentioned earlier, we always like it in combination with vitamin A and K2, with a very few exceptions. If you're pregnant, we don't do vitamin A because it can affect birth defects in the first trimester.
But you do want that K2.
But you do want the K2. So we'll use a D and K2 on pregnant ladies,
right?
But we'll use the ADK2 on most other people.
Right.
And our ADK2 has 5,000 D, 500 K2, and 5,000 vitamin A. Some people don't need 5,000. So it depends. That's why you get your level checked. We might go, we have a 2,000. We have our Megavites 1 has 2,000 in it with some K2. So it depends on the person. That's why it's so important to check your level. We like people to check their levels twice a year.
The best time to check it is, of course, midsummer. I mean, if the sun's out and you've been out in it, and it should be at one of its highest points. The next time to check it is in the midwinter, or right in the middle of the winter, like January, February.
Maybe January, February.
Because that you probably haven't seen the sun in a while, especially if you live in a northern environment,
Right.
Where you just don't get much sun. It's snowing a lot, that kind of thing. Cabin fever and all that's working on you. So you could easily get deficient simply because you haven't been outside.
Yeah. Now, we do see D levels plummet in the winter.
Oh, they do.
They do, because even
here in the deep south.
Yeah, even in the south. When people are outside, they're covered up. And being covered up, definitely you have to have skin exposure in order to produce vitamin D.
Yep.
So the winter is a time that you really tend to be depleted. I even have some people that don't take it during the summer because they're fine, and then we put them on it for the winter time. And think about it, people get sick during the winter, but people's D is much lower during the winter. So it might be something, like, think about it. If you take your D, might help winter cold and flu and all that stuff that people get because their D levels are better.
Right.
So there's a lot to vitamin D deficiency, and it is one of the most common deficiencies that we see.
Yes.
And we are in the deep south where it is sunny 10 months out of the year. So we are in a very sunny area, and we see that much deficiency.
Yes.
So I know that in other areas that don't get out as much, we're probably even worse than they are here.
Right, exactly. But one of the things that we always caution against is you can get too much.
You can. Now, we had never seen many people with too much until COVID hit.
COVID brought
And everybody thought if a little's good, I'm going to take a whole bunch.
Take a bunch.
And
right.
I've had people come in that were on 20, 30,000 a day of IUs, and that is way too much in most people.
Right.
I mean, I've had some people, some people do okay with 10,000, depends on the person, but that is why you check it. You don't just randomly take it because you can get too much. And what happens if you get too much? I've had people with bone pain, their calcium goes sky high, they get weak, tired, nauseous. I've even had
malaise,
I've had a couple that were
fatigue.
bedridden and they didn't know what was wrong with them, and nothing was showing up until they get their D level checked and it's sky high. And we've had some pretty high D levels since COVID. Before that, I can say we probably didn't hardly ever see it. So that has been a problem with people just randomly taking high amounts without doing lab work.
Yeah. Now, in recent years, most labs go up to about 100 nanograms per milliliter and all that. In recent years, some of the researchers have taken that up just a little bit because they find that most people tolerate just a little over that, but not a lot. And so you have to watch, and you have to watch these other parameters.
And they do, and they do say K2 makes it easier to
much better
tolerate
to use.
more
Right.
D if you have K2 with it to make it work properly.
Right. But if you don't,
And someone that is like, I've had people that had been to the doctor and had their D level checked, and it was barely in range. I mean, the range is 30 to 100, and they were at 30. And they, oh, okay, you're fine. I don't think so. I like it at least 55.
well, some of the researchers in that field, recently I was just reading where some of them are saying, we got these parameters all wrong. We need, if you're at 30, you're just mildly deficient. Okay, you're suboptimal, so to speak. So for optimal, 50, and some say at 85. That's kind of the range we use, 50 to 85.
Yeah.
Others will say 50 to 100. And so it depends on what you're thinking about. But the researchers that do this for a living, so to speak, and kind of research this stuff, they're finding that we really probably need a little bit more of it. No doubt about it, all the way around.
So I always think D should be checked twice a year.
Yes.
It should be checked regularly so that you know what you're taking is adequate, because it goes up and down according to what you're doing.
Right.
Because it is one that makes a huge difference if you're out in the sun. So people that are out in the sun more might not have to take as much. Although I've had people over the years, I had a roofer one time out in the sun 8 hours a day with no shirt on, and he was still deficient. And it's because he had gotten so dark from being in the sun that he was blocking his own production.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what you have to do for optimal health.
Right.
And if you like this, if you got some good information out of this, be sure to check out some of the other deficiency that we're making a whole series.
And you can go and look at some of the other deficiency shows to see how you like it.
Like B12 and some other things, iron, et cetera, and so on. And so I think you'll get a lot out of that, kind of help you kind of stay optimal, and you can actually live healthy and be healthy. Thank you for joining us.